The rental pickup truck idled with a low rumble, the only sound on a street that seemed to be holding its breath. Pine Haven, Montana. The name suggested a cozy mountain retreat. The reality was a single cracked asphalt artery with a handful of buildings clinging to it like barnacles to a dying ship. A gas station with a single pump stood opposite a diner called Gracie's, its neon sign buzzing weakly even in the afternoon sun. Further down, the sheriff's office and a general store completed the tableau. Everything from the peeling paint on the storefronts to the faded posters in the windows seemed bleached by time, locked somewhere in the mid-1980s. I killed the engine, and the silence that rushed in was heavier than any noise. It felt watchful. I'd driven 6 hours from Bozeman chasing a ghost of a lead. 3 hikers vanished without a trace in the Sawtooth Peak National Park 2 weeks ago. The official Wire story was a boilerplate tragedy. Lost, presumed victims of the wilderness, maybe a grizzly. But a source back at the paper, a guy who owed me a favor, had tipped me off. "Something's not right with this one, Julian," he'd whispered over the phone. The chatter from the local ranger station went dead silent. It's a full-on blackout. For a journalist whose career was circling the drain, not right was blood in the water. Pushing open the diner door, I was met with the jingle of a small bell and the immediate cessation of all conversation. It wasn't a gradual tapering off. It was as if a switch had been flipped. 6 men, their faces weathered and hard like the surrounding mountains, turned to stare at me. Plaid shirts, worn jeans, hands calloused from logging and farming. They sized me up in a single collective glance. City shoes, clean jacket, the unmistakable air of an outsider. I felt like a microbe under a microscope. I took a seat at the counter, the vinyl of the stool cracking in protest. A woman with a tired but kind face and hair the color of steel wool approached with a coffee pot. "What can I get for you, hon?" she asked, her voice a low murmur. "Coffee, black." "And maybe some information," I said, trying for a friendly tone. "Name's Julian Wright. I'm a reporter." The word reporter hung in the air like smoke. One of the loggers at a nearby table let out a short, humorless scoff. "Heard about the missing hikers," I continued, ignoring him. "Figured I'd come see if there were any new developments." Gracie, the name on her tag, filled my mug. Her hand was steady, but her eyes flickered towards the other patrons. "Not much to tell," she said, her voice even quieter. "The woods. They take people sometimes. It's a sad thing." "I heard they were experienced," I pressed. "They had satellite phones, GPS." A man with a thick beard and a baseball cap pulled low grunted from his booth. "All that fancy gear don't mean a thing when the mountain decides it's your time." I was hoping to talk to anyone who might have seen them before they headed out. Maybe someone in town? Gracie just shook her head, wiping down a spotless section of the counter. The other men went back to their meals, but their silence was different now. It was deliberate. I asked a few more questions about the trail conditions, about grizzly sightings, and received nothing but shrugs and one-word answers. Finally, I laid a $10 bill on the counter. "Thanks for the coffee. Any advice for someone looking around?" The bearded man spoke again, not looking at me. "Yeah, don't go sticking your nose into the forest's business." His tone was flat, not quite a threat, but heavy with warning. The sheriff's office was suffocatingly warm and smelled of stale coffee and old paper. Sheriff Bradley was a man worn smooth by time, his uniform hanging loosely on his stooped shoulders. He looked like he'd been 2 years from retirement for the last 10 years. He listened to my introduction with weary patience, his eyes tracing patterns on his cluttered desk. He slid a thin manila folder across the desk. "This is everything we have, Mr. Wright." "Which is next to nothing." I opened it. A few photos of the missing trio, smiling, vibrant, full of life, a list of their gear, a map of their intended route. "The official report says a possible grisly attack," I noted. "Most likely scenario," Bradley said, his gaze fixed on a water stain on the ceiling. "It's wild country. No remains found? No blood? No shredded gear? The park's a big place. Scavengers are quick." He was reciting a script, and a poorly rehearsed one at that. He wouldn't meet my eyes. That's when I knew my source was right. "Something's bothering you, Sheriff," I said softly. "What aren't you telling me?" He finally looked at me, and his eyes were hollow. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "There was a 911 call. One of them, the woman. The connection was garbage breaking up. Sounded like pure panic." He paused, swallowing hard. "She was screaming. Said they were being attacked by shadows. Shadows with yellow eyes." He sat back, shaking his head as if to clear it. Then the line went dead. "Hysteria, you know? Bad reception. A bear moving in the trees. The mind plays tricks when you're terrified." He was trying to convince himself as much as me. Shadows with yellow eyes. The words sent a cold spike down my spine. My home for the foreseeable future was the Pine Shadow Motel, a single-story affair with a flickering vacancy sign. The proprietor was a rail-thin, twitchy man who took my cash and handed me a key with a trembling hand. "Good lock on the door," he said, his eyes darting towards the darkening woods behind the building. "Best to use it. And just don't go for any late-night strolls." Inside, my room was clean but grim. The air was stale, the brown carpet was worn thin, and the only art was a faded print of a deer. I spread the park map on the lumpy bed, tracing the hiker's route. They were last seen heading into a sector north of the main trail. I cross-referenced it with a few articles I downloaded about other disappearances over the past 2 decades. A lone hunter in 2003. A pair of bird watchers in 98. A chilling pattern emerged. All of them had vanished in the exact same area. An area the old maps, the ones before the park was officially chartered, gave a different name. Not Sector 7B. They called it Whispering Canyon. I was about to turn in when a sound drifted through the thin window pane from the deep woods. It wasn't the howl of a wolf or the growl of a bear. It was a high, thin noise, a horrifying hybrid of scraping metal and a distorted, mocking laugh. It sliced through the night, a sound that felt fundamentally wrong, utterly alien. Every hair on my body stood on end, and the blood in my veins turned to ice water. Whatever made that sound wasn't any animal I had ever read about, and it was out there, in the dark. The morning sun did little to burn away the chilling memory of that nocturnal sound. Ignoring the proprietor's nervous glance and Sheriff Bradley's tired warnings felt less like journalistic courage and more like sheer stupidity, but I loaded my pack anyway. A story like this could resuscitate a dead career, and I wasn't going to be scared off by... What? A strange noise. I drove the pickup to the trailhead marked on the map, the gravel road shrinking to a dirt path swallowed by the immense silent forest. The first mile was exactly what you'd expect from a national park in Montana. Majestic pines soared into the sky. The air was crisp and clean, and the only sounds were the crunch of my boots on pine needles and the chatter of a distant squirrel. It was beautiful, serene. But as I followed the faint trail diverging toward Whispering Canyon, a change began to occur. It was subtle at first. The towering, healthy trees gave way to ones that were gnarled and crooked, their bark peeling like sunburnt skin. The vibrant green undergrowth thinned out, replaced by pale, sickly-looking moss. The air grew still and heavy, and the cheerful sounds of the forest fell away, leaving a profound, unnerving silence. It felt like I had crossed an invisible border into a place that was deeply unwell. I found their campsite in a small clearing. It was a scene of violent chaos. 2 tents were shredded, but not in the way a bear would do it. A grisly tears and bites, leaving ragged holes. These were long, clean slashes, as if made by a set of enormous razors. A camp stove lay on its side. A cast iron skillet was bent nearly in half. Clothing, sleeping bags, and freeze-dried food packets were strewn across the ground. Strangely, nothing of value seemed to be missing. A digital camera lay half buried in the dirt, its lens shattered. A wallet sat open on a rock, cash still tucked inside. This wasn't a robbery, and it wasn't simple animal rage. This was something else. A slaughter. Kneeling down, I examined the soft earth around the campsite. I could make out the overlapping prints of the hiker's boots, frantic and scuffed. But there were other tracks mixed in with them. My breath hitched. They were 3-toed, vaguely avian, but far too large. Each print was pressed deep into the soil, ending in 3 long parallel gashes as if the claws were incapable of retracting. They were the tracks of something that walked like a bird but was heavy as a man, with talons like blades. Near one set of these disturbing prints I saw it, a patch of something black and glistening on the ground. I poked it with a stick. It flaked apart with a glassy sound. Picking up a piece, I found it was brittle and sharp-edged, like obsidian, but it crumbled to a foul-smelling powder between my fingers. The scent that rose from it was acrid and ancient, a nauseating mix of sulfur and rot. I dropped it, wiping my hand on my jeans as if I'd touched something diseased. My eyes scanned the clearing again, and this time I saw the symbols. Carved deep into the trunks of the surrounding trees were spirals. They weren't the simple, elegant spirals of ancient cultures. These were jagged, asymmetrical, turning in on themselves in a way that felt mathematically wrong. Looking at them for more than a few seconds made my stomach churn and a headache bloom behind my eyes. They felt utterly alien, hostile. This place wasn't just a campsite, it was a ritual ground. An altar. A sharp crack of a twig breaking behind me shattered the silence. I spun around, my heart hammering against my ribs. Standing at the edge of the clearing, partially obscured by the twisted branches of a dead pine, was a nightmare given form. It was roughly 6 feet tall, but painfully thin. Its limbs bent at angles that defied normal anatomy. Its skin was the color of old parchment stretched tight over a skeletal frame. Its head was long and narrow, like the skull of a jackal, but its maw was filled with needle-like teeth. And its eyes. They were the source of the yellow light the hiker had screamed about. They weren't reflecting light. They were generating it. 2 burning coals of malevolent intelligence set in a skull-like face. It moved with a twitching, spasmodic gait, its head jerking from side to side as it sized me up. The grating, metallic laughter I'd heard last night echoed in my mind. This was the source. Panic seized me. I stumbled backward, tripping over a tree root and crashing hard onto my back. The creature let out a chittering shriek and launched itself across the clearing, its unnatural, jerky movements making it terrifyingly fast. It covered the 20 feet between us in a blink, a black blade-like claw extended. I threw my arms up in a useless gesture of defense, my mind screaming, my throat locked in a silent cry. The stench of sulfur and decay washed over me as its jaw unhinged, ready to clamp down on my throat. This was it. This is how it ends. Suddenly a deafening roar tore through the forest, a sound of pure primal fury that shook the very ground. A colossal brown shape exploded from the trees to my right, a blur of fur and muscle. A grizzly bear, bigger than any I had ever seen in photos or documentaries, slammed into the skeletal creature. The impact was like a vehicle collision. The jackal thing was thrown sideways, tossed like a child's toy, hitting a tree with a sickening crack of bone. The grizzly stood over me, its massive head turning my way. It let out another rumbling growl, but this one was different. It wasn't directed at me. I stared up into its eyes, expecting the mindless fury of a wild animal. But what I saw there stopped my heart. Behind the animalistic form, behind the wildness, was a flicker of something else. A sharp, focused, and undeniable intelligence. A near-human consciousness looking out from a beast's face. The shock of that realization, combined with the searing pain that suddenly erupted from my shoulder where the creature's claw had grazed me, was too much. The world swam, the edges of my vision darkened, and I plunged into blackness. I awoke to the scent of pine smoke and drying herbs. The world came back into focus slowly, painted in the warm, gentle tones of firelight. I was lying on a soft bed of furs in a room made of dark, polished wood. A thick, hand-woven blanket covered me. My left shoulder throbbed with a dull, clean ache. Looking down, I saw it was expertly bandaged with clean linen and some sort of dark herbal poultice. Through a nearby window, I saw not the tangled, hostile woods I'd fainted in, but a small, orderly settlement nestled in a hidden mountain fissure. Houses, built with a blend of modern and traditional techniques, dotted the landscape. Solar panels glinted on some roofs. There were no paved roads, no power lines connecting them to the outside world. It was a place that shouldn't exist. The door opened and 3 people entered. The first was a young man with sharp, angular features and intense, watchful eyes. He moved with a coiled energy, every muscle tense. The second was an older woman, her long gray hair braided with leather cords. Her face was a roadmap of wrinkles, but her eyes were clear and held a deep, profound calm. The third was a mountain of a man, broad-shouldered and immensely powerful, his quiet presence filling the room. He moved with a slow, deliberate grace. As he stepped into the light, my breath caught in my throat. I recognized the eyes. They were the same intelligent, assessing eyes I had seen in the face of the grizzly bear that saved my life. I struggled to sit up. Where am I? Who are you people? That thing in the woods. The words tumbled out, a frantic jumble of questions. They listened in complete silence, their expressions unreadable. There was no shock, no disbelief on their faces. They knew. My name is Julian. I'm a journalist. I was investigating the missing hikers and I found their camp and then this creature. The woman stepped forward, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to my rising panic. I am Lena. This is Kai, she said, gesturing to the tense young man, and Onan. She indicated the giant, who gave a slow, deliberate nod. You are safe here. We are the people of the hidden stream. That thing, I repeated, my voice shaking. What was it? You saw something you were not meant to see, Lena said, her voice gentle but firm. You have strayed into a war that is not your own. A war. What are you talking about? It was Kai who answered, his voice sharp and laced with suspicion. The things that hunt in that canyon. We are the ones who keep them from spreading. Your presence here, An outsider puts our home, our very existence, at risk. Look, I don't want to cause any trouble, I said, holding up my hands. I'm just trying to understand. People are dead. That monster killed them. We know, Lena said, a deep sadness in her eyes. We were too late to save them. We were not too late to save you. We have treated your wound. When you are strong enough to travel, you will be shown the way out of our lands. You will go back to your world, and you will forget everything you have seen here. My journalistic instincts, dormant for only a moment, roared back to life. Forget this? This was the story of the century. Monsters, a secret tribe, a hidden war. No, I said, shaking my head. I can't just leave. I have to know what's going on. I can help. I can tell people. Bring help. Kai took a step toward the bed, his dark eyes flashing with anger. You will tell no one. Your world would not believe you. They would send their soldiers and their scientists. They would destroy this place to study it. You will not be our ruin. He leaned over me, his face inches from mine. He was not a large man, not like Onan, but he radiated an intimidating aura of contained violence. He reached down and effortlessly lifted me by the front of my shirt until my feet dangled off the floor. His strength was shocking, unnatural. This is not a request, journalist. Onan placed a heavy hand on Kai's shoulder, and the young man reluctantly set me down. The message, however, had been delivered. 2 days later, my shoulder was still sore but functional. They gave me food, roasted venison and strange, delicious roots, and a bitter tea that seemed to accelerate the healing. They spoke little to me, and their community remained a mystery, its people moving with a quiet purpose I couldn't decipher. Then, just as Lena had promised, it was time to go. They returned my backpack, its contents untouched. My rental pickup was waiting for me where I'd left it, impossibly brought down from the trailhead. Kai and another silent warrior escorted me. They walked on either side of my truck as I drove it slowly down a barely there path, their pace easily matching the vehicles. After about a mile, the path joined a familiar gravel logging road. Kai stopped and pointed down the road in the direction of Pine Haven. The other warrior stood with his arms crossed, a silent, impassible sentinel. The message was clear. Go this way. Do not come back. I drove for half a mile, my mind racing. Forget what I saw? It was impossible. The image of the jackal creature, the intelligence in the bear's eyes, the impossible strength in Kai's hands, it was all seared into my brain. I was a reporter. My job, my entire identity was built on one principle: find the truth and tell it. They were wrong about me. I wasn't leaving. Pulling the pickup into a dense thicket of pines hidden from the road, I killed the engine. I grabbed my backpack, checking the contents: a high-powered camera with a telephoto lens, a pair of binoculars, a notepad. They wanted me to forget. But I was going to do the opposite. I was going to watch. I was going to learn. I was going to find out the truth of the tribe of the hidden stream, no matter the risk. I found my perch on a rocky outcrop overlooking the fissure where the settlement was hidden. It was a risky position, but the dense foliage provided excellent cover. From here, with my binoculars and the telephoto lens, I could observe their lives without being seen. For the first 2 days, what I saw was deceptively normal, almost idyllic. I watched them go about their daily routines, a self-sufficient community living in harmony with their secluded world. Men and women practiced with bows and spears, their movements fluid and economical. Children sat in a circle around Lena, listening intently as she spoke, her hands weaving stories in the air. Onan, in his human form, showed a group of teenagers how to track, pointing out signs in the earth that were invisible to me. They tended gardens, repaired their homes, and lived a life of profound peace. It was a stark, jarring contrast to the violent horror I'd witnessed in the woods. But as I watched, I started noticing the cracks in their peaceful facade. I saw the fresh, deep scars on the arms of a man sharpening a spear. I noticed a woman walking with a permanent pained limp as she carried water from the stream. One afternoon, I focused my lens on Kai as he trained a group of younger warriors. He was relentless, pushing them past the point of exhaustion. There was a desperate urgency in his instruction, the look of a commander who knows his soldiers are not yet ready for the battle to come. This wasn't just a community. It was a garrison. My rescue hadn't been an isolated incident. These people were fighting a war for their own survival, every single day. As dusk fell on the third day of my surveillance, they gathered in the central clearing around a massive, crackling bonfire. I expected songs or celebrations, but the mood was somber, tense. Lena stood before the flames, her voice rising in a low, resonant chant. The language was unlike anything I had ever heard, ancient and powerful, full of guttural stops and flowing vowels. As she sang, the very air seemed to hum, and I could have sworn the wind moving through the canyon carried her words, imbuing them with a strange, palpable energy. It wasn't a song of peace, it was a ritual of strengthening, a prayer for battle. My confirmation came late the next night. A sudden frantic ringing of a heavy iron bell echoed through the settlement. The alarm. Doors flew open. People moved with practiced, disciplined speed. There was no panic, only grim resolve. Through my lens, I saw Kai, Lena, and Onan converge near the center of the village. They weren't wearing simple leather clothing now. They donned reinforced armor made of hardened leather and plates of what looked like polished stone. Kai strapped a pair of wicked-looking, hand-forged axes to his back. Lena held a long, slender spear tipped with a gleaming obsidian point. Onan carried no weapon. He didn't need one. They exchanged a few brief words, their faces illuminated by torchlight, etched with grim determination. Then, as one, they turned and melted into the forest, heading away from the settlement, deeper into the national park. They moved with an impossible speed and silence, not like people walking, but like shadows flowing over the terrain. My heart hammered in my chest. Fear screamed at me to stay put, to stay hidden and safe. But the journalist, the relentless, foolhardy seeker of truth, won out. This was it. This was the war Lena had spoken of. I had to see it. I had to know what they were fighting. I slung my pack over my shoulder, grabbed my camera, and scrambled down from my lookout point. Keeping a safe distance, I followed them. It was a harrowing task. They moved so fast I had to run to keep them in sight, my clumsy crashing through the undergrowth sounding like a stampede compared to their utter silence. They were ghosts in the woods, and I was a clumsy mortal chasing them. They led me for what must have been miles, up steep ridges and down into dark ravines, into a part of the park that felt older and more hostile than anywhere I had yet been. The trees here were skeletal, the ground was barren rock, and not even the insects dared to make a sound. The air grew noticeably colder, carrying a sterile metallic taint. It was a dead place. They finally stopped at the edge of a deep, sheer-sided gorge, a wound carved into the earth. They stood silhouetted against the faint moonlight, looking down into the oppressive darkness. And in that ringing, absolute silence, I knew I had followed them to the very heart of the nightmare. Huddled behind a large, jagged boulder no more than 100 yards from the canyon's edge, I watched, my breath held tight in my chest. The gorge below was a pit of absolute blackness, a place untouched by the moonlight that painted the rim in silver. The three guardians stood poised, weapons ready, their stillness radiating an almost unbearable tension. Then, the wrongness began. In the center of the gorge, the air started to shimmer, like the heat haze rising from sun-baked asphalt. But there was no heat here, only a penetrating cold. The shimmer intensified, coalescing into a wavering, unstable patch of distorted space about 20 feet across. It looked like a tear, a wound in the very fabric of the world, and through it, I saw not the rock wall of the other side of the gorge, but a swirling, sickly vista of bruised purples and angry reds. A low, wet, tearing sound filled the air, accompanied by the dry, incessant clicking of chitin. The wound pulsed, and the first of them crawled through. It was a horror of insectoid design, a skittering thing the size of a large dog, with too many jointed legs and a segmented body of iridescent black carapace. It was followed by another, and then another. Then came the ones I recognized. The gaunt, jackal-headed creatures from the campsite, pouring through the rift with their lurching, unnatural gait. Their yellow eyes burned in the darkness, sweeping the area with predatory hunger. They were an army of abominations, spilling from that tear in reality into our world. My horror, however, turned to stunned disbelief at what happened next. Lena raised her spear and let out a sharp cry, a single word in that ancient tongue that cracked like a whip. It was a command. In response, Kai threw his head back, and a guttural snarl ripped from his throat. His body contorted violently. I heard the sickening pop and crunch of bones reconfiguring under his skin. His form elongated, his spine arching as black fur sprouted from his flesh. His features twisted and stretched into a canine muzzle, his teeth lengthening into vicious fangs. In seconds, the man was gone, and in his place stood a massive black wolf, its eyes glowing with a cold, intelligent fury. Beside him, Onan let out a roar that was no longer human. His frame swelled, muscles bunching and expanding with terrifying speed, shredding his leather armor. Coarse brown fur erupted across his body as he grew, rising up on his hind legs to an impossible height. His powerful arms ending in massive paws tipped with claws like daggers. He was the bear. The colossal, intelligent grizzly that had saved my life. Lena's transformation was the most breathtaking. She leaped from the canyon's edge, and as she fell, her body became fluid, her arms widening and flattening, feathers sprouting from her skin. She didn't fall. She soared, catching an updraft, now a majestic golden eagle. Her wingspan easily 15 feet across. Her cry a piercing shriek that echoed off the canyon walls. I could only stare, my mind refusing to process what my eyes were seeing. Shapeshifters. Skinwalkers. Legends made real. The battle began. It was a whirlwind of primal violence. Kai, the wolf, was a black blur of speed darting through the demonic ranks, his powerful jaws snapping spines and crushing skulls. The eagle, Lena, was death from above. She dove from the sky with silent precision, her talons sharp as steel hooks, tearing out the yellow eyes of the jackal creatures or lifting the insectoid monsters into the air only to drop them onto the jagged rocks below. And Onan, the bear, was an unstoppable force of nature. He waded into the thickest part of the horde, a living battering ram, swatting creatures aside with blows that pulped chitin and shattered bone. They fought with perfect coordination, a seamless dance of tooth, claw, and talon, forged from centuries of practice. For a moment, I felt a surge of hope. They were winning. But in the chaos of the fight, one of the jackal creatures broke away from the main melee. It had been lurking at the edge, and its twitching head swiveled, its burning yellow eyes locking directly onto my hiding place. It had seen me. With a horrifying chitter, it bounded toward my boulder, its bladed claws kicking up stones as it came. I was frozen, trapped. There was nowhere to run. It leaped, a skeletal specter against the bruised sky of the portal, claws aimed at my face. A roar of fury cut through the din. Onan, the bear, saw the threat. In an incredible display of speed for a creature his size, he disengaged from his own fight and spun around, covering the distance between us in 2 massive bounds. He didn't have time to strike the creature. Instead, he threw his immense body in front of me, taking the full force of the jackal demon's attack himself. The creature's razor claws tore deep into the bear's side, ripping through fur and flesh. Onan bellowed in pain and rage, and with a single furious swipe of his paw, he sent the demon flying, its body smashing into the canyon wall with a final wet crunch. He had saved me again. And this time, he was badly wounded for it. High above, Lena the eagle let out another piercing, command-like cry. The portal was beginning to pulse erratically, threatening to disgorge even more horrors. Kai the wolf and the wounded Onan the bear seemed to understand instantly. They turned their remaining fury not on the demons, but on the shimmering wound itself. They charged it, their combined roars of rage and power creating a physical wave of force. As they slammed into the shimmering air, the portal buckled. With a deafening boom, like a thunderclap in a sealed room, the wound in reality imploded, sucking the remaining demons back into their hellish dimension before vanishing, leaving only silence and the cold, dead air of the gorge. In the sudden, ringing silence that followed the portal's collapse, the 3 guardians transformed back. The process was just as visceral and seemingly painful in reverse. Fur receded, bones shifted, and in moments, the exhausted blood-spattered forms of Kai, Lena, and Onan stood where the totem spirits had been. Onan staggered, clutching a deep, ragged gash in his side, blood flowing freely between his fingers. Kai's head snapped in my direction, his eyes blazing with a fresh wave of fury. He took a step towards me, his hand reaching for one of the axes on his back. "You," he snarled. "You followed us. You saw." "Enough, Kai." Lena's voice was weary but held its authority. She placed a restraining hand on his arm. Looking at me, her expression was not one of anger, but of grim resignation. "It is done. He has seen. Now, he is a part of this." My mind was still reeling, a chaotic swirl of shapeshifters and demons and portals to another dimension. I was a part of this? I was a journalist from the city who, 48 hours ago, thought a grizzly bear was the most dangerous thing in these woods. They led me away from the gorge of death, half supporting the groaning Onan between them. We didn't return to the main settlement. Instead, Lena guided us to the mouth of a cave hidden behind a waterfall. Inside, the walls were covered with ancient paintings depicting giant bears, wolves, and eagles fighting shadowy figures with yellow eyes. It was their history, their war, painted on the rock for generations. As Kai tended to Onan's wounds with practiced hands, using sutures and another herbal poultice, Lena finally told me the truth. "We are the last of the guardians," she explained, her voice echoing softly in the cavern. Our bloodline carries a sacred bond with this land and with the great totem spirits, wolf, bear, and eagle. It is our duty, our curse, to be the keepers of the seals." "Seals?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "This world of yours is not as solid as you believe," she said, gesturing to the cave paintings. "There are places where the veil between realities is thin. Weak spots. Our ancestors called them wounds. Long ago, they performed great rituals to seal these wounds, to keep them," she pointed to a depiction of a jackal-headed demon, "from spilling through. We are the protectors of those seals." I described the creature that had attacked me at the camp in detail: the jackal skull, the burning eyes, the unnatural movements. A shadow passed over Lena's face. "There were other clans once," she said, her voice heavy with old sorrow. "Each bonded to a different spirit. The clan of the jackal was one of them, but their shaman was ambitious. He was not content to be a guardian. He craved the power of the things on the other side. He made a pact with them, betraying his oath and his people, believing their chaotic power would make him a god. For his treason, his clan was cast out, their name erased. The legend calls him the first traitor." "Malachi!" Kai spat from across the cave, his voice thick with hatred. "His descendant. He has returned. For years, the attacks have been small, probing. Now he is growing bolder. He is not just attacking. He is systematically breaking the ancient seals, one by one." The pieces clicked into place. The missing hikers weren't random victims. They were caught in the crossfire as Malachi broke the seal in Whispering Canyon. "Why?" I asked. "What does he want?" "He does not want chaos for its own sake," Lena said. "He is a zealot. He believes your world has become weak, corrupt. He wants to unleash the demons to cleanse it with fire and blood. In the new, twisted world that remains, he and his masters will rule." We returned to the settlement under the first light of dawn. With my new understanding, I saw it not as a peaceful village, but as a field hospital on the front lines of a forgotten war. The small building I'd thought was a community hall was a lazaret, and it was filled with wounded warriors, men and women bearing injuries far too severe to have come from any normal animal. Women and elders weren't just cooking. They were crushing herbs, preparing bandages, brewing potent healing teas. This wasn't a myth they were living. It was a brutal, desperate, and seemingly endless struggle. Later, I saw Kai organizing a small group of non-combatants: children, the elderly, the most seriously wounded. They were packing small bundles, their faces etched with fear and sadness. "What's happening?" I asked him. His anger towards me had cooled, replaced by the weary pragmatism of a soldier. "We are sending them away. To the deep shelters in the mountains. The attacks are coming more often. The seal in the gorge was a major one. Malachi will be enraged that we stopped him. He will retaliate. We can no longer guarantee the safety of the village." A thought struck me, something that seemed insane just yesterday but was now a terrifyingly logical question. "What about Pine Haven? That town is only a few miles from here. If there's another attack, a bigger one." Kai gave me a bitter, mirthless smile. 3 generations ago, when the loggers and miners first came, they found one of our outlying villages. They called our people savages. They burned our homes to the ground in the name of progress. Those people in that town will believe in demons and portals about as much as they believe our legends. But, he added, his jaw tightening, we swore an oath to protect this land. All of it. Even the parts that have forgotten us. I spent the next day in the settlement of the hidden stream, and the lens through which I viewed the world shifted forever. I was no longer an outsider looking for a story. I was a witness. I helped where I could, carrying water, chopping wood, tending to the less severe injuries under the guidance of an old woman who moved with quiet efficiency. I saw their courage, their resilience, their profound sorrow for their fallen, and their fierce determination to protect what was left. These were not mythical figures. They were people, fighting a war no one else knew existed, bleeding for a world that would call them liars or freaks. That evening, Lena found me by the stream that gave their tribe its name. The setting sun painted the canyon walls in hues of orange and purple. "Thank you for your help, Julian," she said. Her calm presence was a balm in this chaotic new reality. It is rare for an outsider to show such heart. "They're heroes," I said, looking back towards the village. "All of them. They are sons and daughters, husbands and wives," she corrected gently. "They do what they must. I see more than just a reporter's curiosity in your eyes now. I see honor, which is why I must ask you again for their sake. Leave this place. Go back to your world. Keep our secret. It is the greatest help you can offer us." I looked from her wise, tired face to the towering peaks that hid this place from the world. She was right. It was the logical, sensible thing to do. But somewhere between seeing Onan take a hit for me and watching a child say a tearful goodbye to his father who was staying to fight, something inside me had broken. The dispassionate observer was gone, replaced by a man who had seen the abyss and could no longer pretend it wasn't there. "I can't," I said, the words feeling heavy and absolute. "I can't just walk away knowing that a town full of blissfully ignorant people is living on the brink of annihilation. Malachi isn't just your enemy. He's an enemy to everyone. I have to do something." "And what can you do?" she asked, not with malice, but with genuine curiosity. "You are not a warrior. You cannot shift your shape." "No," I admitted. "But I have one weapon they don't. Words. Information. I'm going to Pine Haven. I'm going to talk to the mayor. I'm going to make him listen." This time, Kai escorted me back to my truck. The hostility was gone from his eyes, replaced by a grudging respect. We stood by the driver's side door in silence for a moment. He extended his hand. I shook it. His grip was like iron. "You are braver than you look, newspaper man," he said, a faint smile touching his lips. "But you are wasting your time. Their ears are closed to the truth." "I have to try," I said. "Good luck," he said, and melted back into the trees. The drive back to Pine Haven was surreal. The familiar sights, the diner, the gas station, the sheriff's office, now seemed like a fragile movie set, a flimsy facade hiding the terrifying reality that lurked just beyond the tree line. People were laughing outside the general store. A teenager was riding his bike down the middle of the street. A couple was sipping coffee on a porch swing. They were living their lives, completely unaware of the monstrous storm gathering just over the mountains. Their ignorance was a luxury they couldn't afford. I found Mayor Thompson's office in the small municipal building next to the sheriff's station. He was a man in his 50s with a politician's smile and the restless energy of someone preparing for re-election. His office was covered in photos of him shaking hands and cutting ribbons, the biggest one showing him crowning the winner of last year's Lumberjack Festival. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I burst in, breathless and frantic, and the story came tumbling out. A chaotic, unbelievable narrative of ancient tribes, shape-shifting guardians, demonic creatures, and portals to other dimensions. I told him about the Whispering Canyon, the Broken Seal, and the imminent threat posed by a madman named Malachi. Mayor Thompson listened, his smile slowly tightening, then vanishing completely. He steepled his fingers, leaned back in his chair, and stared at me as if I were a particularly fascinating insect. When I finally finished, the room was silent. "Mr. Wright," he said, his voice dangerously calm. "That is quite a tale. Have you been drinking, son?" "No, I'm serious. You have to evacuate the town, or at least issue a warning. Tell people to stay indoors, to barricade their homes." He stood up, his folksy demeanor replaced by cold annoyance. "Listen here. I'm trying to run a town. We have the Founders' Day picnic next week. I do not have time for campfire stories from some city reporter who spent too much time alone in the woods. I think you need to go see a doctor." He picked up his phone. "In fact, I'm about to call Sheriff Bradley and have him escort you." "You're not listening to me," I shouted, my desperation mounting.
"You're all going to die."
He just laughed. A smug, dismissive laugh that sealed the town's fate. "Get out of my office." "Please, Mayor, just listen," I pleaded, blocking his path to the door. My voice was raw with desperation. "Even if you don't believe me, what's the harm? Announce a severe storm warning. Use the old town siren. Anything to get people off the streets and into their homes." Mayor Thompson shoved me aside, his face flushed with anger. "I'm not starting a panic because some journalist went crazy. This conversation is over, right? Now get out before I have you thrown out." He laughed again. That same arrogant, condescending sound. Demons from the sky, honestly. As if on cue, the world outside his office window plunged into shadow. It wasn't a cloud passing over the sun. It was a sudden, unnatural twilight that fell over Pine Haven in the middle of the afternoon. Thompson's laugh died in his throat. We both turned to the window. A bird fell from the sky, then another, then a dozen. They hit the asphalt of the main street with small, sickening thuds, their bodies limp and lifeless. From across the street, the cheerful conversations in front of the general store faltered and died. People looked up at the darkening sky, their faces a mixture of confusion and alarm. Then came the sound. A low, mournful wail began to rise, a sound that hadn't been heard in Pine Haven for 50 years. It was the old air raid siren on top of the firehouse, a relic of the Cold War, groaning to life. Someone, somewhere, had seen something terrible enough to sound the alarm. Thompson and I, forgetting our argument, scrambled out of the municipal building and onto the street. Everyone was frozen, their upturned faces pale in the eerie gloom. I followed their gaze. Directly above the town square, the sky was wrong. A hairline fracture of purple light appeared, then spread, branching out like cracks in a sheet of glass. With a sound like tearing fabric on a cosmic scale, the sky ripped open. It was the wound, the portal, not hidden in some remote gorge, but gaping wide over their homes, their businesses, their lives. It pulsed with the same nauseating, otherworldly light, a malevolent purple eye staring down at the helpless town. The first scream was a prelude to a symphony of terror. Hell rained down on Pine Haven. The insectoid creatures and the jackal-headed demons poured from the rift, not crawling but falling, hitting the ground and immediately scrambling to their feet, their yellow eyes burning with hunger. The town dissolved into pure primal chaos. People ran, screamed, fell. The monsters were brutally efficient, their claws and teeth tearing through the fragile illusion of civilization. Mayor Thompson stood beside me, his mouth hanging open, his face a mask of catatonic disbelief. The reality he had so confidently dismissed was now dismembering his constituents in front of him. Just as the first of the jackal creatures turned its attention towards us, a sound cut through the pandemonium. a long, defiant howl that was both animal and clarion call. They had come. From the edge of town, from the direction of the forest, 3 figures burst onto the main street. The great black wolf, the colossal grizzly bear, and soaring above them, the majestic golden eagle. The guardians of the hidden stream had arrived to honor their oath. They slammed into the demonic horde like a tidal wave, a desperate last-ditch defense for the very people who had forgotten them. The sight of them, of Kai and Onan and Lena in their true forms, snapped me out of my shock. I wasn't a warrior. I couldn't fight those things. But I could still save people. The basement! I roared at Thompson and a handful of others frozen in terror near the municipal building. Get in the basement! My shout broke their paralysis. I grabbed a stunned teenage boy by the arm and shoved him towards the door. I half-pushed, half-carried a weeping woman inside, shouting directions, herding the terrified, catatonic residents of Pine Haven into the one safe place I could think of. While the demigods fought for the soul of their town, I, the newspaper man, would at least save their bodies. The main square became a whirlwind of violence, a brutal intersection of 2 worlds. Kai, in his wolf form, was a phantom of death. He moved with surgical precision, a black streak that flowed through the chaos, jaws snapping with lethal efficiency. He wasn't wasting energy on the larger insectoids. He was targeting the jackal demons, the more intelligent and dangerous of the foot soldiers, taking them down before they could organize. Onan, the bear, was the anchor of their defense. He was a living bulwark, a battering ram of fur and muscle, absorbing the brunt of the assault. He stood his ground near the town's central monument, taking on the largest of the chitinous beasts, his thunderous roars mingling with the shattering of carapaces. High above, Lena, the eagle, was the battle's strategist. She swooped and soared through the chaos, her piercing cries not just attacks but commands, directing Kai to a flanking enemy or warning Onan of a threat from behind. She was their eyes in the sky, a golden blur of righteous fury. After shoving the last of the terrified townsfolk I could find into the municipal basement, I peered out through the thick wired glass of the front door. I had to know. I scanned the battlefield, my eyes searching for the source. This attack was too coordinated, the portal too stable. Malachi had to be here, and then I saw him. He was standing on the flat roof of the Pine Haven Bank, a dark figure silhouetted against the swirling purple vortex. He wore a ritual mask fashioned from the elongated skull of a jackal, and dark robes that writhed as if alive. He wasn't fighting. He was conducting. His arms were raised towards the portal, his fingers tracing intricate patterns in the air as he chanted in a low, guttural language. He was the focal point, the channel. His dark magic was holding the wound open, widening it, pouring more and more of his demonic army onto the street below. The Guardians saw him at the same time I did. They couldn't win a war of attrition. They had to cut off the head of the snake. With a roar that drew the attention of half the horde, Onan created an opening, a momentary gap in the demonic line. It was all Kai needed. The black wolf shot through the breach, a living arrow aimed at the bank. Halfway across the square, he transformed, his body reconfiguring mid-stride. He hit the wall of the bank as a man, his momentum carrying him upward as he found holds in the old brickwork, scaling the 2-story building with inhuman agility. He vaulted onto the roof, his twin axes in his hands, and faced the traitor. The fight that ensued was brutal and personal. Malachi fought with a long, obsidian-bladed knife and the twisting, corrupting power of his dark arts. Tendrils of black energy lashed out from his hands, forcing Kai to dodge and weave. It wasn't just a battle of strength. It was a clash of ideologies. Kai's raw, protective fury against Malachi's cold, destructive ambition. From my vantage point, I saw Kai land a glancing blow, but Malachi was stronger, fueled by the portal. A blast of dark energy caught Kai in the chest, sending him staggering back toward the edge of the roof. He was losing. My mind raced, fueled by adrenaline and terror. I couldn't fight Malachi, but I could create a distraction. I saw Sheriff Bradley's pickup truck, keys still in the ignition, its door hanging open where he'd abandoned it. Next to the bank stood a massive old-fashioned billboard advertising the Lumberjack Festival, its heavy steel support posts sunk into the concrete sidewalk. An idea, insane and desperate, took root. I sprinted from the building, a mad dash across 20 yards of open, monster-strewn pavement. A jackal demon turned toward me, but a diving attack from Lena bought me the second I needed. I leaped into the sheriff's truck, slammed the door, and twisted the key. The engine roared to life. I didn't hesitate. Ramming the truck into gear, I slammed the accelerator to the floor. The tires squealed as I aimed the heavy vehicle not at the bank, but at the billboard's main support pillar. I braced for impact. The collision was deafening. Metal shrieked and groaned. The massive steel post buckled, bent, and then snapped. For a moment, the huge billboard hung in the air, then it began to topple, falling directly toward the roof of the bank. On the roof, Malachi was forced to choose. He could finish Kai, or he could save himself. With a curse, he broke off his attack and leaped back, dodging as tons of steel and wood crashed down onto the roof where he had been standing. His concentration shattered. His ritual was broken. Above the town, the portal shuddered violently. The flow of demons ceased. The wound began to contract, its light flickering and dimming. Robbed of their connection to their master and their dimension, the remaining demons on the street seemed to weaken, their movements becoming sluggish and confused. It was the opening the Guardians needed. With renewed ferocity, they began to cut down the stragglers. Malachi, seeing the battle was lost, staggered to his feet amidst the wreckage on the roof. He looked down at the chaos, at Kai rising to his feet, and he let out a laugh that was pure, undiluted malice.
"This world will rot,"
he screamed, his voice echoing across the square.
"I will return to watch it burn."
He turned and leaped, not off the roof, but directly into the collapsing portal. The wound in the sky snapped shut with a final thunderous clap, and he was gone. Silence descended upon Pine Haven, a silence more profound and terrifying than any that had come before. It was the silence of aftermath, thick with the smell of sulfur and blood. The main street was a ruin, littered with the broken bodies of townsfolk and the dissolving black ichor of the demons. In the center of the carnage stood the Guardians, exhausted and wounded, back in their human forms. Onan's side was bleeding afresh, and Kai leaned heavily on his axes for support. The surviving residents of Pine Haven began to creep out from their hiding places, their eyes wide with a mixture of terror, shock, and a dawning reverential awe as they stared at their saviors. The dawn brought a different kind of invasion. The low thumping of helicopter blades grew into a roar as military vehicles, drab olive green and unmarked, rolled into town, sealing it off. Soldiers in full combat gear established a perimeter, allowing no one in or out. This wasn't a rescue operation. It was a containment, a cover-up. Within hours, the official story began to circulate, passed between men in dark suits with earpieces. A train derailment a few miles out. A tanker car carrying an experimental hallucinogenic nerve gas from a nearby military base had ruptured, the wind carrying it over the town, causing mass hysteria and violent riots. It was a clean, plausible lie. I, along with a still catatonic Mayor Thompson and the 3 guardians, was escorted not to a command tent, but to a secluded, heavily guarded mobile headquarters set up in the woods. Inside, we were met by a man in a crisp uniform, his collar bearing the silver eagle of a full colonel. He introduced himself as Colonel Matthews, a man whose calm, intelligent eyes told me he was from a branch of the military that didn't appear on any public record. He gestured for us to sit. "Let me be clear," Matthews began, his voice devoid of any emotion. "We know what happened here was not nerve gas." He slid a tablet across the table. On its screen were satellite images and spectral analyses from other parts of the world. A remote village in the Amazon, a desolate patch of Siberia, a mountain monastery in Nepal. Each showed evidence of similar, smaller-scale events. We call them incursion events, breaches. We've been tracking these phenomena for years, but we've never seen one of this magnitude. We've never had survivors who could tell us what was on the other side. His gaze settled on Lena, then Kai and Onan. And we have certainly never encountered allies capable of fighting back. He looked at me. "Julian Wright, you're a journalist. According to the preliminary reports, you were the first to understand the threat, and you forged a bridge between these people and the town. You're the only outsider who has seen the full picture, from the initial signs to the final battle. That makes you the most valuable asset we have right now." He leaned forward, his expression deadly serious. "The lies we are telling outside are for public consumption. But in this room, we deal with the truth. Malachi escaped. The threat is not gone. It is merely relocated. We need to understand it, fight it, and contain it. We can't do that alone." He offered me a position not as a journalist, but as a civilian consultant to a new, fully funded, and completely off-the-books task force dedicated to dealing with these incursion events. My job would be to act as a liaison, an analyst, a historian of a war I'd only just discovered. The decision was not mine alone to make. After a long, tense negotiation, conducted mostly through Lena's quiet, powerful words, the Guardians agreed. They had protected their valley for centuries, but they recognized that Malachi was now a global threat. They could no longer fight this war from the shadows, alone. They needed resources, intelligence, and allies who understood the true nature of the enemy. Later that day, I stood on the same hill where I had first spied on their village, looking down at the quarantined, sterilized town of Pine Haven. The army was erasing the battle, paving over the truth with lies and concrete. I had come to this forgotten corner of Montana chasing a story that could save my career. I found something else entirely. I found a truth so vast and terrifying it threatened to swallow the world. My old life, my career, my ambitions, they were all meaningless now, ashes from a world that no longer truly existed. The war against the things that lurked on the other side of the veil was real, and against all odds, I was now one of its soldiers. This wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of the war.